The meeting. Reading of the meeting's notice, please.
The Board of Directors of the School District of the City of Erie, PA will meet in special session on Wednesday, June 26, 2019, in Conference Room 1 at the Dr. James E. Barker Leadership Center, 148 West 21st Street, Erie, PA, at 12 p.m. to approve the 2019-2020 final budget and for general business purposes by request of the President, Frank Petrunga, Jr.
Thank you. Roll call.
Mrs. McNair? Here. Mr. Spagel?
Here.
Mr. Titus?
Here.
Mrs. Alexandrovich?
Excused.
Mr. Castillo?
Here.
Mr. Fabrizi?
Here.
Mrs. Feeney?
Here.
Mr. Harkins?
Here.
Mr. Petrunger?
Here. Pledge of allegiance followed by a moment of silence. Mr. Brockman, will you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Hearing the citizens, persons desiring to speak for 5 minutes must submit the request in writing to the Secretary's office at least 1 week prior to the board meeting. All others may speak for 3 minutes. We have no 5-minute speakers. Would anybody like to speak for 3 minutes? Not seeing any, we'll move on to new business.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Harkins,
move we adopt a new business, that being item 3 on the agenda.
motion to accept by Mr. Harkins,
Second.
second by Mr. Spagel. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
could the superintendent explain the homestead and farmstead exclusion mentioned here? I think I know why it's here, but just wanted to put it.
Certainly. This is the annual calculation that we do to distribute the gaming revenue to homesteads throughout the city. The allocation and the payment per parcel is very similar to what it was last year. It's only off by, I believe, less than $1.
Thank you.
Anybody else have anything? If not, roll call, please.
Mrs. McNair? Mr. Spagel?
Yes.
Mr. Titus?
Yes.
Mr. Castillo?
Yes.
Mr. Fabrizi?
Yes.
Mrs. Feeney?
Yes.
Mr. Harkins?
Yes.
Mr. Petrunger?
Yes. We'll move on to the budget. I did separate this only for one reason, so I could vote on it. I can't. I understand everything with our plan and everything. I just can't in good conscience vote yes for this. So that's my only reason.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I move we approve it.
Motion by Mr. Harkins,
Second.
second by Mr. Spagel. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Could the superintendent succinctly just lay out what we're choosing between, in other words, what is funded if we approve the budget and what is left out and where we'll be if we don't, if we modify it and reduce it or don't raise the tax?
This budget incorporates the recommendation of the financial plan to raise real estate taxes 2.46%. It includes funding to pay the debt service on the bond issue that we just finalized in May. And it also includes some funding for the educational initiatives that were part of our strategic plan, which have also been incorporated into the financial plan. Specifically, it's going to fund on a recurring basis a curriculum cycle so that we can keep our curriculum current instead of going another 20 years before replacing. And in addition, it also provides funding that we did distribute using that internal fair funding formula to provide additional supports to students that are not on grade level. If the board would not want to approve the 2.46% tax increase, we would have to bring you a budget that is balanced, which would mean that we would eliminate more than likely the supports for the students that are not on grade level. Those would be the instructional and interventionist for the most part in order to balance this budget this year. But I need to caution the board that even if we do that, it does not eliminate the need for tax increases in future years. So in order to maintain what we have without the instructional supports next year, we would still be looking at a tax increase of 2 to 5%. So if we do make this cut this year, then It will be very difficult, if not impossible, to build those supports back into the budget at a later date.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. We've had discussions before on all that's involved, but I just wanted to clarify in my own mind and make the point that something is gained or lost, whatever we do. There's no, nothing's chosen.
Mr. President?
Mr.
I'm
Patillo.
sorry, John.
That's all right. I was about done.
I have an issue, a couple of issues. One in particular, did we or did we not have a surplus moving into this school year?
We had a
To
surplus,
Mr.
yes.
Polito. We did. And how much of a surplus did we have going into this year?
And for our fund balance, right now, we have a fund balance of approximately $8 million.
8 million.
Which represents about a month and a half worth of expenditures for the district.
Yeah. And it's relatively normal that a district would have approximately 1 month expenses in a reserve. Am I correct?
Actually, the reserve that's recommended for a district our size is approximately $18 million. We settled on $8 million because we felt that that would be enough to ensure that we would pay our bills on time and have a little bit set aside just in case there was any items that occurred during the year that we did not budget for.
Thank you. And the state's portion, I know it's not finalized because the state hasn't allocated, guaranteed an allocation to public education this year. However, we anticipated an increase in state revenue, and how much is that anticipation this year?
I do not know the number off the top of my head. However, we did receive information last night that the proposal that the House submitted to, that the House passed and the legislative leaders and the governor agree on, actually provides for a revenue increase that is $183,000 less than what we currently have in the budget.
Repeat that again, please, Brian.
We build our budget based on the governor's proposal. The proposal that's currently working its way through the House and Senate and is anticipated to be approved or passed by the governor includes state revenue that is $183,000 less than what we have in our budget, actually the budget that you have before you right now. So we will immediately have to make some type of transfer to balance that out.
Now, under the fair funding formula, we are to receive additional revenues to more or less provide a catch-up for the Erie School District, am I right? Do we have any idea about what that is going to amount to?
That for the
Anticipating all things being equal.
We have, and we reviewed this with the projections, that's built into our 5-year projections for the basic ed subsidy. We anticipate about a 3% increase per year.
In addition to the state apportionment for public ed?
That's combined for the basic ed formula, which is the only one that is driven out with the fair funding formula. So we get a little more than the average school district. So if the overall increase in basic ed funding is around 2%, we receive about 3%.
So we get an additional 1% bump
Roughly.
annually until we're at par with other districts, right?
In about 100 years, yes.
Give or take, give or take.
27 years.
So, okay, I just got a question, because I'm
I'm
looking at
still
the.
asking questions.
No,
please. I'm still asking.
it's to your, I just have the state budget in front of me, that's why I'm just
Okay.
bringing it up to you.
Well, okay, I'll see it. I just wanted to direct a couple more questions.
Okay,
Oh, go ahead.
well, you can go, since you so politely tried to tell me about myself, but I was trying to help you.
Well, thank you. I could use all the help.
Okay,
Thank you. Okay, so back to the train of thought. We're getting an additional 1% bump up and above the state average per school district. We have a surplus of $8 million. And I know it's allocated specifically. And I'm just taking issue with us having to increase that 2.46% to appease Rivera because he thinks that we need that tax increase for us to maintain liquidity. Now, assuming that we get an annual increase every year on the state budget, we got, call it 3% this year in state funding. So that now becomes our base moving forward, right? So if the same thing held true, next year we'll receive an additional 3% based upon the prior year's funding, right? Under the safe harbor or however they're allocated. So our income is going to continue. We are in a liquid position right now. Our cost anticipated would be, I believe, less than 2%. Doesn't it increase overall? Our budget moving forward, less than 2%. So we're going to have a 1-point change increase in, hopefully, increase in liquidity. I just have to say, and Angela, thank you for setting on this with me, but I just have to say that I have a real issue with voting for a budget that includes an unnecessary tax increase. And with that, I'll yield to
Respond to.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ms. McNair.
I just want to point out that looking at one budget year in a vacuum without taking into consideration how that will affect future years is one of the reasons why we got in trouble many years ago. And that's why we built the projections and we have PFM. The issue here, it has nothing to do with what Mr. Rivera wants. It has everything to do with the current structural imbalance in our budget, where our revenues are increasing roughly 1% a year, and typically, and when you look at the projections, our expenses are going 2% a year. The $14 million gave us 5 years to correct that structural imbalance. We have identified charter enrollment as one of our big challenges, and have started targeting different initiatives to maintain our students here in the district. But at the bottom line is that we need to invest in our programs and our buildings if we're going to maintain our students and give our families a reason to stay here in the district. And that's what this budget does. And in addition, this budget also, again, provides the educational resources we need and we morally have a responsibility to provide to educate our students properly.
Angela?
Thank you. Because he definitely didn't mind when he so politely cut Mr. Harkins off, because he wasn't done talking either when he started talking. But I'll go ahead. So I have the, you were just talking about the amount of money that we're going to be getting from, you doing your projections based off of what we're getting from the state budget, which I happen to have in front of me. And I do see that it's like a 3.2%. That's the increase that we're getting from them. And it looks like, I'm trying to stick with Erie because they got every school district like back to back. It's really little. And it looks like there's an increase for the special, is there an increase for the special education funding too
Yes.
as well, right?
Yes.
Okay, it looks like a 5, is that a 5.4%? Is that the increase?
I'm not sure it's that high.
That's what it looks like from what and if I'm looking at the right.
It's for asking me some specific questions tonight.
I just happen to know it. Like, this is something, I really don't say much unless I know what I'm talking about. But the point is, I do see that we do have some increased funding from the state. I understand why you're trying to be so I believe that you're trying to be proactive in the situation so that we don't end up back where we started at. So I understand that too. As a person who does run a business, you know, when you see the light, you know, sometimes you get excited and you feel like you have a cushion, but at the same time, there's always a reason to have money in reserve. And I'm pretty sure, I'm not saying Tom agrees with my position on anything I'm saying, but as another business owner, I'm pretty sure he can see that perspective as well, as far as like planning ahead. And as a district, I do feel like we do need to have these improvements such as curriculum and things that our children just haven't had in over 20 years. And we're gonna spend a lot of money trying to make a lot of improvements. No, I do not want a tax increase because I pay taxes, and it gets on my nerves every time anybody increases it, because that's more money I have to pay on my parents' house. You know, that's, it can be an annoyance. Even when they changed the tax schedule, it was an annoyance because it just made me have to pay more sooner than, you know, I expected to. But at the same time, you know, in order to increase some of the positive things that we want to see in the schools that we steadily get complaints about, not having books, not having curriculum, not having updates in years and years and years, we're about to spend a lot of money. So, and we haven't been raising taxes on a schedule as we should be raising taxes, like some other districts do. So I don't want to see a tax increase because I do not want to pay more taxes. I do not want my older aunts that are retired paying more taxes, or my retired uncles paying more taxes. But I feel like we need to be consistent on what we do and not wait, you know, years and years, 0, 0, 0 for 4 years, and then all of a sudden here comes 3%, 4%, 5%, you know, things like that. So long story short is, I'm really not for a tax increase, but I do know when things are necessary, and I do know that we need better programming for these students, period. You know, the city wants better for these students, and sometimes we have to put a little squeeze in things to make sure that, you know, they have what they need to be properly educated and to get on that level that, you know, we're trying to uphold, you know, other schools and other situations to a certain standard. We have to hold ourselves to that standard too and do better for our students too. So, I mean, I'll be voting yes, but not because I want a tax increase, but just because I want to make sure we don't get back in the situation that we were in before, because we're about to start making a lot of major purchases for curriculum and programming and things like that for our students.
Thank you. Mr. Spiegel?
Well, and I'll agree a lot with what Angela just said. You know, I know some people say this isn't a business, but Erie School District is one of the largest businesses in the county. Just look at our $200 million budget, it's undoubtedly a business. But we have to invest in this business. Not just invest in the business, but we have to invest in our students. They're just driving to work today. I went past Wilson, see all the work that's being done over Wilson. It's very obvious to see what our taxpayer money is going for when you have a roof. Presumably they're working on a roof there. And I think one of the prime variables that we wanted to consider was keeping our students dry. You know, that's very, very essential, let alone the curriculum that Angela was talking about. Nobody wants a tax increase. Nobody wants to open up the wallet, but it's something we have to do. We have to invest in our students, and because investing in our students invests in our community and in our future. You know, I had a conversation just yesterday with a parent who's considering now their child's going to either high school in Erie or in Milford. He was a baseball student, and I'm trying to convince this parent, and they're like, why? Well, why would I bring my student to Erie High School with their issues? And he goes, have you looked at their building? And I'm trying to say, no, we're doing things better. I'm doing the selling. And we, as a board, can't sell our district if we don't have a good product to sell. I sell stuff all day long, and I can't sell my product if it's not a good product. We, as a school district, we can't sell our product if it's not good enough. And it's currently, in my opinion,
you know, is not good enough. But we can sell them the hope and the future that it will be, and we're making the improvements and the processes in place, that it is going to be a better product. It's going to be a better product as soon as next semester coming in. Those kids at Wilson will now be able to be dry, and something as silly as that. My mother doesn't want to pay taxes, we pay for it. You know, she doesn't have the money. And there's a lot of people, and I certainly empathize with a lot of them. But as Angela had said, you can go through so many zeros before all of a sudden we end up being in debt. We don't have curriculum. We have school books that think if you were to open them up, that Clinton is still our president. But that's kind of embarrassing. You know, when I go to these other schools in Mill Creek and wherever else, they have beautiful schools and current curriculum. How do we compete with that? The only way we can compete with that is investing in our community. It happens to be through school taxes. So, you know, I'm in favor. I was in favor of taxes. That's an oxymoron. But I'm in favor of investing in the future.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Mr. President,
Yes.
I just kind of want to reiterate that it's very frustrating that we as a board and as a district are in this position because it's by no lack of effort. It's by no lack of effort that the school board and the district has done everything within their power to not have to go into this. And I think that when we're going to, rightfully so, have some very frustrated people, especially those who are on fixed incomes, who don't have the same opportunities or privileges to gain better employment, and we're going to have to answer to them. And I would strongly encourage each of them to also look at where their vote is going, because a lot of this is a position that we were put in, and it's unfortunate the district now has to make some very, very difficult decisions and place those who are already experiencing extreme socioeconomic difficulties and another difficult financial situation. And I do feel that this was because of a lot of decisions that we weren't part of, but that we're doing the very, very best that we can as a district to do right by our children and to do right by the families within our district. And so I guess my ploy out to all those who are constituents and within our district would be to make sure that to know who you are voting for, and to know who you are aligning with, and that they do have your very best interests and the community as a whole when they are speaking for you on behalf of you. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Mr. President?
Yes.
Thank you. Just a question, the 2.46%, is that representative only for this particular year? Or is this going to represent, by us adopting this budget, and a built-in 2.46% increase for the next 4 continuous years? Is this part of the plan that we are going to increase taxes by 2.46 each year?
The plan calls for 2.46% each year. I'm hoping that this is the highest year for these increases, but you know, we are going to have to look at this again next year and determine whether or not we can afford another tax increase. We're going to have to review this each year and more than likely look at some type of cost of living increase. And again, I just want to remind the board, as Angela pointed out, that this is nothing new, that in the past this board has gone for multiple years with 0% increases and then did a series of 9, 5, 4% increases, which averaged out to a cost of living type increase. So this isn't really a change in what the district does as far as tax increases go. It's only a change in how those increases are going to be distributed.
And on an average $100,000 home, that represents approximately how much a year increase?
$41 a year.
$41 a year, so it would be a couple of $100 in 5 years increase. Just to bring up a point. Yes, the board back in 2003, as I recall, voted for a zero tax increase, regardless of what the financial condition was, for no increase. And they took pride in the fact that they operated without an increase for like 4 years after that. Back when I got on the board, I was an advocate for a tax increase because I, based upon the information that I read, that we were going to run into a major deficit, and was pretty much told, no, we aren't going to go with the tax increase. Well, subsequently, we wound up with ultimately a $26 million deficit as a result of it. So, you know, back then, I was an advocate to increase taxes, and got put in my place, I guess, being a rookie at the time. You did mention the allocation of the additional monies, and strategic planning was a part of that 246, correct?
That's correct.
Do you have an idea of approximately how much of that 246 is going toward curriculum and strategic planning?
All of it. Right now, if the 2.46 does not cover everything we're doing this year. We, without the 2.46%, we are able to fund our debt service on the new project, which is $3 million a year. We would be able to, at this point, this year, maintain our curriculum cycle. We would not be able to fund the additional supports for students that are not on grade level this year. If we go to next year, there would be no money to even consider. If we did do an increase this year and did not fund those positions, there would be no money to consider those type of supports next year. And if the board did not want to do a tax increase next year, the next thing that we likely would be looking at is that recurring curriculum cycle. So we would have to strip that out in order to balance our budget, and so forth. If we wanted to balance our budget, without a tax increase, the only way to do it would be to cut.
So we're going to earmark the tax increase toward curriculum and advancing our strategic plan.
I say that would be a fair statement.
I'm a strong advocate of our strategic plan. I absolutely believe that the district will advance terrifically and exponentially as we move forward in utilizing the strategic plan and implementing it. Oh, I'm sorry, that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. No one else?
Mr. President,
Yes, Ms. Feeney.
hi, how's everyone doing there?
Good, good.
Good, good. I wish I could be with you to speak, but unfortunately I have to do it over the phone. I just want, I appreciate everyone's opinion. I appreciate the fact that we respect one another, we respect our opinions, and that it's okay for us to say, I think differently. And I do think differently on this issue because I lived through it. I lived through the cuts year after year after year. I came into the district in 1996, and I think for most of my career, we were looking at cutting things for our students. I've seen the devastating effects of not having these intervention supports for our students. I've watched our passing scores plummet because our students are not meeting the expectations that we have for them. I have seen our teachers go without educational materials to have to prepare all of those things on their own. I've seen teachers spend thousands of dollars a year because they know how important it is to give the children that are in front of them the best education they possibly can. And we really owe this to our students, and we also owe this to our community. And yes, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be hard for some of our taxpayers to come up with this money. But again, we live in a state that was the first state in our country to say that public education is something that all children You know, the Free School Act was adopted in 1834. And I'm very proud of that. And I think that if we would consistently fund this budget instead of, you know, saying, oh, well, we have a little bit of a surplus, so we're not going to raise taxes at all. I think we're being a little bit irresponsible, or not a little, we're being irresponsible here. We only have an $8 million fund balance, and our superintendent is telling us that we should have an $18 million fund balance. So I wish we'd raised taxes last year. Then maybe this year we wouldn't have had to have raised them to 2.46. But at this point, we've had many financial people come in and tell us, experts tell us, that this is something that we absolutely must do. So I just caution us as a board going forward that we need to continue to have this fund balance. It is a good financial practice, and again, we owe it to our students and we owe it to our community.
Thank you. Okay, if no one else, roll call, please.
Mrs. McNair?
Yes, sorry, I knew I was first.
Mr. Spagel?
Yes.
Mr. Titus?
Yes.
Mr. Castillo?
Yes.
Mr. Fabrizi?
Yes.
Mrs. Feeney?
Yes.
Mr. Harkins?
Yes.
Mr. Bertrunger?
You know, I'm listening to everybody here, and I spoke for the last almost 2 years about not raising taxes. But I do understand the other part of it, on how we have to keep moving forward. And I'm gonna say yes. Move on to award on bids.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I move we award the bids for art supplies as presented before us.
Well, we have to do 501 first.
That's the one.
Okay, there's 2 there.
Yeah, just the art supplies.
Okay. I have a motion by Mr. Harkins.
Second.
I'll give this one to Mr. Cassillo. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. McNair?
Yes.
Mr. Spagel?
Yes.
Mr. Titus?
Yes.
Mr. Castillo?
Yes.
Mr. Fabrizi?
Yes.
Mrs. Feeney?
Yes.
Mr. Harkins?
Yes.
Mr. Bertrunger?
Yes. Award on bids for curriculum supplies.
Move we award that.
Motion by Mr. Harkins,
Second?
second by Mr. Spagel. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. McNair?
Yes.
Mr. Spagel?
Yes.
Mr. Titus?
Yes.
Mr. Castillo?
Yes.
Mr. Fabrizi?
Yes.
Mrs. Feeney?
Yes.
Mr. Harkins?
Yes.
Mr. Bertrunger?
Yes. Now we're gonna have a discussion on LERTA. Mr. Polito.
Everybody's second favorite subject. As you are aware, the City Council did pass a LERTA resolution with a 100% commercial LERTA. The only difference between the resolution that they passed recently and the one that was proposed about 2 months ago is that they included, and this is on item number 6 of your LERTA summary in front of you, a $25 residential and $100 commercial application fee to go to a newly created community reinvestment fund. The city is also going to contribute $25,000 a year out of their revolving loan fund, which they were at one point going to earmark to help us with the LERTA. The funds will go to reinvest into the community, ensure that all members benefit from this. This is probably not as much of a concession on the community benefits that some people want, but I think it is a move in the right direction, and I want to point out that this is nothing to do with the school district, that piece of it, that is only adopted by the city. So the city has asked us if we would consider adopting a resolution to do, as we propose, the 10-year 80% LERTA on commercial properties and 10-year 100% LERTA on residential properties. And I just a couple highlights that I have below here. I just want to point out here that based on the analysis that we did and we shared with you in April, that this is beneficial to both our main stakeholders, our students and our taxpayers, because with the 80%, with the 20% of revenue that we anticipate getting with the new development, we will see through the term of the financial plan, if we have a $13 million annual development, $346,000 more in real estate tax revenue. And by the end of the 10 years, our annual tax base would be $601,000 higher than it would be under the existing LRTA. And again, this assumes that this LRTA does spark development. Right now, we see about $6 million in development a year. The proposal here is assuming that pretty much doubles to $13 million. If that happens, then we would, that really would eliminate the need for, a 1.3% tax increase over that time period. If the development is $26 million, which is what happened the last time we had a 10-year 100% LRTA, our revenues would be $1 million better off by the end of the financial plan, and it would increase our tax base by $1.7 million, which would allow us to reduce our tax increases over that time period by 3.7%. And again, we did put some controls into the resolution that says that if the development does not reach the level of $100,000 or $10,000 a year, which is our break-even point, we can revisit that in 2 years and terminate the LRTA, which protects us from any downside on this proposal. So given all that, I would like to recommend that the board consider this resolution.
Discussion, any questions? Yes, Tom?
As I look through this, Tim, would that be any retroactive applications, or that's not going to be addressed?
No, there's no retroactive applicability of this.
I'd be not in favor of that.
So, Mr. President?
Yes, go ahead.
So this is if we vote on this today, this is the end of the whole LRTA issue? Is that what you're saying?
Well, at this point, we're not asking for a vote. If there's enough
Or
support,
agree?
I would be asking for a separate meeting to.
Oh, so
Special
you're
meeting.
asking for a special meeting to vote?
Well, I wanted to have a discussion before we take next
To
steps.
see where, because we've never
Oh,
had.
so we're just discussing
We're
this,
discussing,
right?
yes.
Okay,
So it's
so I'm
relevant
just,
right now.
okay, because I'm just reading the attached, and it looked like,
That-
policy talk.
Well,
right here.
and I did have Tim draft what our resolution would look like.
Okay,
So
I
that you
know I
had
wasn't
all the information.
Mistaken, it looked like a
Yes.
policy. I'm
This
like,
is-
I'm not voting on this today.
Right now, it's strictly just to have a
Okay,
discussion,
so what's
questions,
the,
answers.
what is the community reinvestment fund? I mean, I did go to the one LRTA hearing, but I didn't hear them really talk about this.
That's something that they added after.
After the hearing,
Yes.
okay, I'm like, I know I didn't hear this in the hearing.
That's a separate fund that was created by a separate ordinance by the city of Erie.
Okay.
We would have nothing to do with that. It's going to be funded by the $25 application fees that that have been added for residential LRTA applicants, and the $100 application fees by the commercial LRTA applicants, as well as the $25,000 that the city is going to put in there each year. That money will then be utilized by the city to provide for community benefits and other reinvestments. How that's going to occur and specifically what they're going to do, we have nothing to do with.
Right.
But that's a separate ordinance that we're not adopting, we're not considering. The only thing that we would be approving related to that would be a LRTA program with application fees that would be directed towards that fund.
Well, I just got a question. Hold on, Robbie's up.
Hey, it may be a silly question, but, so, like, when they say 10-year LRTA, okay? So now the people that apply for the LRTA in the first year, they get 10 years off with their taxes, okay? In the second year, they get 10 years. So actually, this is like a 20-year commitment, right? Because if somebody would apply in the 10th year, they would get 10 years?
No, We put limits on that to ensure that the development happened in the first 2 or 3 years, was that?
This, Mr. President?
Go ahead.
The LERTA sunsets on July 31st, 2024.
So it's a 15-year commitment.
No,
So
so
it's a 5-year thing, so if it sunsets in 5 years, so.
So
you're
all
saying
applications would have to be within 5 years, and somebody who applies
at the very end of the 5th year.
on the end of the 5th year, they would get 10 years going
So
forward.
that's 15 years, is what I'm saying. A 15-year commitment as a body to LERTA is what I'm discussing, not, you know,
Right, you could say that, yes.
right. But that sunset, that's immovable, that is.
No, and that's why we put in the section about if the development does not reach the level of $20 million after 2 years,
Right.
that it sparks, it creates a
It would trigger a public hearing and a consideration by the taxing bodies as to whether you wanted to continue the LERTA program. So you could cancel this in 2 years if you so
In 2
desire.
years, and so whoever didn't get in 2 years,
right.
we'd have to give them their 10, so that would give us.
They, right, so they would get their
that'd be
10s.
12 years, that's all.
And the reason is so that if it really doesn't spark that development, then we can just shut it down before it hurts us.
Right, and I understood that that's what we had, I just wanted that to be understood by everyone, that that's how this is, we're looking at it. We're not giving a blanket LERTA like that was in the past. We as a board, the school district, has set some limitations here to say, if it produces the kind of infusion of funds into the city that it's promising, and it should, if it's going to do it, it should do it in the first couple of years. If it's not, it's not, and I think that, I think 2 years, we could have went 1 year, but 2 years is good enough, I mean, that's fine. So I'm tending towards it to some degree with that being written on it.
Mr. Cassillo.
Thank you. Item number 2 in the summary, the commercial LERTA, and kind of, this is a little ambiguous. School district will enact a 10-year, 80% commercial LERTA. City and county will pass a 10-year, 100% commercial LERTA. This is effectively a 10-year, 90% LERTA, since the city and county make up 50% of the total real estate tax bill.
So what that means is because we're 50% of the tax burden in the city, with the 80%, when you look at the overall tax bill, with us going 80% and the city and county going 100%, it effectively reduces the overall tax bill by 90%.
Overall.
Yeah, so the difference between what's going on now and what it will be is that we get all the money. Right now on the bigger development projects, the bigger commercial entities are getting 90%, but 10% goes to the city, 10% to the county, and 10% to the school district. The way now we're going to get all of that revenue, we're going to get 80%, and they're both going to get 0.
Okay, so they're just reducing their revenue and
Shifting
giving
it to us, and that's in recognition of our financial situation.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. President.
Yes.
Mr. President?
Hold on, Darlene, Tyler got in before you.
All right.
When does the current LERTA expire?
I'll be right back.
And presuming those who are on, so when this current LERTA expires, we'll be receiving revenue that we weren't receiving on those properties. And then we will not receive any revenue on the new additions, but we'll be receiving on what is existing.
No, so as far as how those LERTAs are expiring, it all depends on when they put their LERTA application in. So the last 10-year LERTA, I think, was up for 5 years,
Okay.
10-year 100%. So those are starting to roll off and come on the tax rolls now. The ones that on this LERTA, as soon as they issue a building permit and they start paying taxes, we immediately get 20% of the tax revenue. So we don't have to wait we have to wait for 80% of it, but we get 20% right now.
So I guess I'm just making, it's essentially, it's double dipping is kind of what I'm looking at. So those who are on the previous LRTA, they will be coming off and then they'll be giving us money that they had built on that during under that LRTA. And then we'll be getting 20% on the new structures. We had discussion before on not doing the full 100%, and we like the reduction. Where is that?
That's the 80%. So
We had talked about like not even doing the 10, like coming down every year like a 10%.
we did, we ran that scenario, and that's the one where it was not beneficial to us. Actually, it was not beneficial to us, and it was not beneficial to the taxpayer. So we decided to go in this direction, and that was really a concession on the mayor's part. We initially started that graduated scale because he really wanted 100% in those first couple of years. But again, if it's 100% for us, then that means no revenue until anything kicks on, and that's why we felt that if we at least got some revenue in the front end, it would balance us out. And actually, again, if we're getting 90 or 10% on the current large projects, the 80% is actually better than what we're receiving right now.
And then do we have the figures on how much stemmed from the last LRTA?
26 million.
Yeah, it was
26 million?
26 million. I have that somewhere for each of the years.
Go ahead, Tim.
Mr. President, the current LRTA would expire in 2022, so the amendment adopted by the city only extends it 2 years. So that the city amended the existing LRTA program for new applications. So that only extends the sunset period by 2 years.
So it doesn't end in 2022?
So the city adopted their LRTA program. The 2012 LRTA program adopted by the city, county, and school district expires in 2022. The action taken by the city on June 19th amended that program, and through the amendment, they extended it until 2024 to give it the 5-year period of time in which to work.
And then my next question would be, so I know we have that 20% or 10% that we'll be getting. But in the meantime of that 10 years, we're going to continue with our tax increase on the residents as we just the discussion before. Correct?
That's correct.
So I guess this is where I have the strongest stick point, and I keep coming back to it, is essentially we just voted to raise the taxes on people with fixed income. And we're going to enter into discussions to levy the taxes for a period of time on potentially the wealthiest people within our city, the wealthiest companies. So those who could pay their taxes will have a reduction, while those who are on fixed incomes will increase. I guess for me, I have a moral and ethical dilemma there.
Mr. President.
Mr. Spagel, or wait, hold on, Darlene was
Go
next.
ahead.
I apologize.
Thank you. I would like a clarification, if possible, under the LRTA Act. There's been a lot of calls from the community for a community benefits agreement. And so I'm wondering if under the provisions of the LRTA Act, we are even able to attach such an agreement to the legislation.
Mr. Wagner.
Mr. President, we're talking about 2 specific acts here, the Local Economic Revitalization Tax Assistance Act and the Improvement of Deteriorating Real Property or Areas Tax Act. Those are programs that are handed to us by the state complete. It is for the city, the school district, and the county to determine whether they want to implement those programs. The way that the law works in Pennsylvania, we're a Dillon's Rule state, it is called. Dillon's rule says that local governments only have the power to do that which they are authorized to do by the state legislature. So we are given the ceiling in terms of our powers. Under Dillon's rule, we would not be permitted to attach anything to a LRTA program or the other one, the improvement of deteriorating real property programs, that changes the program, that changes the decision-making process, the implementation, that waters down the program. The program's given to us in a box, and we're allowed to implement what's in the box. We can't change what's in the box. So it is my legal opinion, and I can provide it to the school district in writing, the school board in writing if you so desire. But to answer Ms. Feeney's question, no. We don't have the power to make a conditional LRTA because as that area has been preempted by the state.
Thank you.
Ms. Rodriguez.
Mr. Spagel was next, sorry. Are you, Darlene, are you done?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Spagel.
Well, I guess this is just following up the conversation and discussion with Tyler. You know, we have to kind of separate. It makes it sound like the only people that are going to be benefiting are the rich business guys. And I really don't see that's the case. Certainly, hopefully, they will benefit because those are guys that actually bring jobs and economic development and income into the city. That you always want those guys, whoever those guys are, to do that because otherwise, they have the opportunity to go anywhere they want to. Not just Erie, they can go to Mill Creek, they can go to Tennessee. You know, it's all an investment for them. And at the end of the day, I'd hope to like to think that a lot of the business guys are philanthropic with their thoughts of helping out Erie. But at the end of the day, they're businessmen. If they could invest $100,000 in Erie or in pick a place, Kentucky, that's where they're going to go. And they have to follow because at the end of the day, you know, shareholder wealth is the only thing that businesses care about. Not only thing, that's not true, but that is their prime concern as it should be. But the other thing is, provides an opportunity for some of the lower income people to finally get into a house. Because they could buy a house, they could buy some land and build on a house that they wouldn't have the opportunity otherwise, because one of the biggest stumbling blocks in purchasing a home, of course, is paying the taxes. If they can get in there with much lower taxes, I see that as a win-win for the people that have lower income because they have now the opportunity to get into home ownership. And if you talk about statistically, particularly with African Americans in Erie, I'll tell you, the biggest thing that holds back African Americans is the inherited wealth. And how do you inherit your wealth is through land ownership. This gives an opportunity for people across all social economic statistics to get into home ownership, which would be, in my opinion, best for the city, particularly of those that are in need. And the other thing is, those other people, just like we had talked about, and this board changed my decision one time, right across from my house, somebody is still participating into the previous LRTA, and this gentleman is a professional, and although he's paying, you know, next to nothing of what the value of the ownership, or but to that land, the value of that land is, we get the benefit of his high income on the side of the income taxes. So I really don't see how this can really be a negative. Now, if we start doing the math, if it's not in our benefit, then we have the policy in place. We can revisit it, change it, amend it, discontinue it. But I don't see in what spectrum, across the social economic boundaries, of how it's going to hurt somebody versus helping us all. Maybe it's out there, but just in general discussion.
Mrs. McNair.
Tom is talking so long. Okay, so you saying that the school district cannot attach any type of community benefits, legally, community benefits agreement. And is that just for the school district or is that for the city as well?
It's for the city, the county, and the school district.
So it's for all of us?
Yes.
Okay, because I've just been keeping up on things, and I know it don't look like I'm never paying attention, but I really do. Because when you hear me talk, you know that I do. But I've been just keeping up on the things, and I know that, we've all been approached with community benefit agreements, and some of us want them, some of us may not want them. But despite of whether we want them or not, I've heard, comments about, it's not, we can't make people morally responsible by attaching community benefits agreements, but I never heard anyone say that we legally can't do community benefits agreements. So that was something learned today, that we legally can't do that.
Not through this vehicle, not through attachment to alert. Whether the school district can do a community benefit agreement requirement as a standalone is something we'd have to look at. I'm not sure that there's the power to do that in the school code, but I didn't come prepared for that conversation. I came prepared for a LERTA conversation. So LERTA is not the vehicle to achieve that.
Hold on. We're both putting them up at the same time. That's all right, hold on.
I was looking.
You good?
Oh, I'm
I
done.
know you never do. One question, transferability. I develop down at the Bayfront and it's worth $20 million. I sell the property to you in year 2. Does LERTA transfer with the sale of the commercial property?
The state statute says that LERTA attaches to the property, not to the owner. So if you do new construction, if you do an improvement, whether it be of a commercial structure or of your residential home, and you were to sell it before those 10 years are up, the new owner would continue to have the benefit of the abatement for the remainder of the 10-year period.
That could be one great windfall for a developer.
And you would anticipate
offer
that they'd put
that.
that into the deal, right?
Sure. And, that would probably increase the value by 20% or more of that development.
Good.
Tyler?
So, I guess just to kind of follow up on a few points, I wasn't very clear, and I apologize. I know that I'm not anti-tax incentive. I'm not anti-tax incentive at all, and I think, like Tom had pointed out, we do need them to keep companies building. What I am anti is giving tax incentives that don't guarantee protection of our city residents, our employees, that's not guaranteeing livable wages, jobs that are going to be brought in. And some of the discussions that I heard were, they're going to build hotels, they'll build restaurants, they'll build these things. You cannot pay. You can't raise a family. You can't, even as a single person, live off of those kind of wages. What these don't do is eradicate the barriers that prohibit homeownership. Like Tom had alluded to, this is a great win for residents. They could get in, and that is how you gain stock and value. It does not eradicate the plethora of barriers that are contingent upon clean background checks, policing, racism, all these other impediments. So I just want to be clear on that. Yes, this does, on paper, seem like it will give a boost, but when you start to break it down, it is still a very segregated way of bolstering a community. That being said, I'm really not anti-tax incentives. I just think we as a school board, as a city, and as a county could have done a much more aware and inclusive job of keeping bigger buildings here, encouraging companies, and then building up our community and protecting our most vulnerable through the process. I think that this was a really quick way of doing it. It doesn't seem quick, but I think that there are much more thorough options that would have helped our families versus, I really, in my heart of hearts, with the research I've done, believe that this is going to hinder them in the long run. That also being said, I think we need to look at the licensure applications and the building applications. If we're not going to be able to change any of the language within the LERTA, which we can't legally, we can, however, look at when they are applying for permits to build or when they're getting the license and things to build, what kind of language do we put there in place to make sure our residents are protected? A certain percentage, recommendations of diversity and inclusion. So there are creative ways around this. And I just want us to be aware of that so that this isn't, even if we pass the LERTA, which I know I may not have the votes to stall it out on this end. I think we can still be responsible on that side of things too. So I don't want us to give up that conversation of other ways of protecting our residents and our students and our families.
Were you to say something?
Just wanted to add what Mr. Titus said. The applications and trying to implement some level of diverse hiring procedures within the city through the applications for doing business in the city, whatever it is. That would be more of an advocacy job on your part for city council to implement that, as the school district doesn't. Just for the viewers at home, the school district doesn't have the ability to impact that by vote.
I wish I knew some applicants.
Do you know any?
No,
Do you know how to do that?
I'm not good at it at all.
I'm a good advocate.
Yeah, I know you would.
Larry?
Mr. President, I just want to clarify, that the reason I'm recommending this is, and this is strictly to me a financial decision, because what we have in front of us is better than what we have with our existing LRTA. So if we do nothing, and the development is not sparked, then we're going to be, with at $13 million, $345,000 worse off than we are right now with the existing LRTA as it is. So again, I know there's been some talk about how can we do this when we're doing a tax increase, but if this does spark the development, this will give the board an option over the next several years of one, either reducing those tax increases, or two, taking some of those funds and investing them back into the classroom. So that's why I am making this recommendation.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, John.
with all the strong concerns and opinions that swirl around this issue, I salute the superintendent for conceiving and including the 2-year safety valve provision. But I have a question about that. In the papers that we were given here today, we have a summary and what looks like a model resolution for us to consider adopting.
Right.
And in that model resolution, on the second page, in the second whereas, it says, whereas part of the review process, the board of school directors and superintendent request that the proposed city ordinance program include a 2-year period to ensure desired transfer. It just says we're going to request that the proposed program, which now is not proposed, as I understand it, now it's enacted. So to request it doesn't sound strong enough to establish that it's there firmly. And related to that, it says on the first page of the summary, number 5, that the taxing bodies would convene a joint committee to consider terminating the alert early. And that allows us to terminate if development does not reach the level needed. Well, if just stopping with that right there, if that hearing, that joint committee hearing is held and we choose to terminate, are we able to do that as part of being part of this joint approval?
Mr. Harkins, if I can address that for you. With respect to your first issue on the whereas clause, I'd put that language in for the school board to consider to indicate that the 2-year safety valve, as you call it, was a school district initiative that was adopted by the city. And it appears that I did leave the fact that the city adopted it out of there. So I can revise that provision to make it stronger, to ensure that it states that, we requested that the proposed city LRTA program include the 2-year review period to ensure that the city LRTA program is producing the desired financial impact. And that provision was reviewed, considered, and approved by city council as part of the program. They did accept it.
So when the time comes for the resolution that we will adopt, we can put stronger language there. This is that guarantees firmly that we are able to draw after 2 years.
So in item number 2, actually within the resolution, it indicates that the school district of the city of Erie is adopting the city LRTA program as attached as Exhibit A. And if you move to Exhibit A to the resolution, you'll see a copy of the City of Erie ordinance, which is much, much longer and has more details and all the specifics. So I'm indicating in that resolution that the school board is adopting the city program, as it is the city that is implementing it and administrating it. And in that Exhibit A, if you look at the second to last page, Article 381.06, we have the program review provision, which is the language that we provided to the city, stating that no later than October 1st, 2021, the county assessment office is to provide the city, county, and school district a report containing essentially any information necessary to help us make a decision, this body make a decision as to whether you've met the minimum $20 million review. And then in the event that the value of the total new development is less than $20 million, the taxing body shall convene a joint meeting to consider repealing the ordinance due to the failure to attract a necessary minimum level of development. So inherent within that, the school board would have the ability to make that decision unilaterally. If the school board wanted to withdraw its support for LRTA at that time, but the city and the county wanted to continue, you are not bound by their decision. You would make that decision independent of them.
Okay, it could be every man for himself at that point.
Yes.
But they are honoring and including our request and your adoption of what they did.
That has been adopted, that is in the final signed version from City Council.
All right.
And it is the exact language we provided to them.
Well, I know we'll discuss this further at the meeting that will be called to act on this, but just one other minor thing, on the following whereas, the next one down, the last of them, I think that word council on the second line should be county. I assume that's a typo.
Yes, Mr. Harkins.
Okay.
Darlene, John's doing your job.
Thanks, John.
Take turns.
Did you have something, Rob?
I just want to just clarify, so what you're saying is at the end of the 2 years, the city, the county, and the school district are all going to review it, and because of our suggestion, but each body will be making that same review at that point, right?
So the language says that there'll be a joint hearing, so everyone will come together, hear the evidence, so to speak, that it is meeting the minimum $20 million worth of development, and then if the city and the county decide that everything's fine and we're just gonna let it keep going, they don't have to do anything, it'll just continue to go. If the school board wanted to repeal this resolution, you can do, you'll make your own decisions.
That's all I'm saying.
You'll make your own decisions.
But everybody is going to have that consideration at the end of the 2 years because of what we put in there, that they've also adopted that same thing, that everybody's gonna look at it in 2 years, and if the investment isn't where it should be, they may throw it out.
We inserted an automatic trigger to force that review, yes.
Okay, sounds good.
It also puts the developers on notice that
Get it
better
done.
get it done, yes.
Okay.
Any more questions?
When do you anticipate the meeting might be?
We've been asked to consider it sooner rather than later because the mayor, again, would like to get this done so that development can start. I was informed yesterday that county council actually scheduled a meeting to vote on this on July 2nd, which is next Tuesday. However, they would prefer for us to vote on it before that, which only gives us one option if we want to honor that, and that's Monday, July 1st. And if we do not, that, there's no obligation for us to do that.
I'm available.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Is it possible, even though it was a review and not an agenda item for a vote, can we call for a vote?
I think
Today.
it's Mr. Wapner.
Anticipated that question.
How did I expect that?
We try to think of all possibilities, except the question Mr. Titus had earlier.
Well, that wasn't going through your head on a 50-mile walk.
No. The school board's board rules require that in order for an item to be on the agenda, it be given to the board secretary 5 days before the meeting in order to be placed on the agenda. However, Robert's Rules of Order, which is our guidebook for all things not included within the board rules, specifically provides for an option to suspend the rules. If this board wanted to adopt a to make this a voting item today at this meeting, a motion to suspend the rules would have to be made. And then what you're doing is you're setting aside the board rules. That requires a 2/3 vote of the school board. Now today we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 members. 8 members, thank you. So we'd be looking, that many, we'd be looking at 6 votes in order to approve suspending the rules. Should the rules be set aside, a motion would then need to be made to add the consideration of the LRTA resolution, we'll say as amended by Mr. Harkin's comments, to the agenda. That would be a simple majority vote. Should that then pass, it will be considered to be on the agenda, and you would need a standard motion to approve or deny at that time.
3 motions.
3 motions. The first of which, to suspend the rules, would require a 2/3 vote to make that happen.
So it could be considered today, and since we're here, I'm for considering it and seeing where it goes. And if it fails, then we have time, but if it doesn't, we don't have to think about coming back on Monday.
Mr. President, I make a motion to suspend the rules?
Second?
Motion by Mr. Spiegel, second by Mr. Cassillo. Any discussion?
No. Well, we can have discussion, and I'd like to just say, I'm
This
gonna
is just about the
about
suspension
suspending
of
the
the
rules.
rules.
Just to suspend the rules.
So I'm gonna vote no on suspending the rules, because I believe that we should take a little bit more time, that some of the people that are considering it one way or the other, a couple of days or on Monday, I would rather than being, I just think that, I don't want anybody to feel that they were taken by surprise here today. And there's a couple that I can see their look on their face right now, and so I'd go on that side. So I'll just go, my discussion is, I'm going to vote no on the suspension of the rules.
Okay. Darlene, were you gonna say something?
Because I'm out of town, and to be honest with you, I don't hear all of the conversation. Things are going in and out. And so for that reason, I would prefer to physically be there to vote on this and to have a discussion with the board. So I would also vote against suspending
Okay.
the rules.
I'm gonna vote no too.
So it appears, Mr. President, that we have a motion on the table.
Right.
You have and a second, you have an indication that it may not prevail. So you need to dispose of the motion. That would either be withdrawn, or it would be called for the vote and let it die. Let it fail.
Yes.
I withdraw the motion.
Okay.
Thank you.
So then, is everybody okay with the first? At noon?
Yes,
Darlene?
yes.
Why are you shaking your head no?
I'm not gonna be here.
You can call.
Oh, I'll give you a call.
I know you will. All right, so let's go for the first. That way it gives people time to review it, think about it, maybe other questions they may have, and we'll do a meeting on the first, right here at noon. Is that okay?
Is that enough time to announce, is that 5 days?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. You don't count Saturdays and Sundays, or do you?
Well, technically, under the Pennsylvania Sunshine Law, we only need 24 hours of advertisement in order to have a special meeting.
Okay.
Okay. You do have to have an executive? Okay. All right, well, I'll take a motion to adjourn then.
Move.
Is that a recession to the executive session?
We're not doing executive now.
Okay.
You said it.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I
So-
misunderstood.
Bobby's motion to adjourn, do I get a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Fabrizi, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.
It's always a